Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Jim Decker. I'm your chairman of the board for this year, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedules to join us today for our State of Missoula address. Before you today, we've gathered an excellent panel of experts to engage in discussions regarding the impacts of small businesses. I have the pleasure today to introduce our MC, Nick Kaufman. Nick Kaufman's with WGM Group, the Vice President, Principal Planner. Nick's got more than 34 years of experience in planning and design of residential, commercial, and industrial development, mixed-use development, traditional neighborhoods, shopping centers, and sporting facilities. His expertise includes the development of comprehensive plans implemented through land use regulation and capital facilities planning. Mr. Kaufman's education and experience, what? I'm not done. That's a long list. Sit back. It's allowed him to incorporate innovative planning and design options with a thorough understanding of the public review process and each project for maximum return to both the client and the community. Personally, Nick shares a spot with me on our chamber board. He's also on my executive board. He's also our chairman of Legislative Affairs Division. Tell you, I don't know how he gets it all done, but please help me welcome Nick Kaufman.
Thank you very much, Jim. Would you stay up here, please? Would you stand right over here? I've got another role for you. Good afternoon. How is everybody? Beautiful day in Missoula. Sun's going to come out. The first thing we're going to do is the Pledge of Allegiance. And Michelle Landquist, I think you're over there. Would you lead us in the pledge now? I'm an economist. And so the first thing we're going to do, Michelle, is assume we have a flag. And so Jim will assume that role. All right. So, Michelle, if you'd lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
The flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Michelle. Welcome, everybody. There's a couple of housekeeping things I'd like to go over with you all today. First of all, thank you for coming. We have 4 incredible speakers today. At the end of the presentations, and there will be 4 presentations, what we'll do is have each table think of questions for the speakers. And so you'll have an opportunity at the end of the presentations to ask the speakers a question. Now, at each table, you've got some assignments, okay? First one would be to think of 2 different questions. Because if Bill's table thinks of a question that Jason's table has thought of and they only have 1 question, you won't get to ask your question. So think of 2. Also at your tables, there will be a piece of paper, and I want you to think about the things that the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce can do for your business over the next coming year. Topics that you might be interested that would help you become more successful business people in Missoula. All right? So that's the housekeeping portion of it. Small business. There is no such thing as small business. Small business people are people of stature. They're people of innovation. They're people who collaborate. They're people who create comparative advantages where other people don't see comparative advantages. They're people who have employees, who pay those employees benefits like health care. They're people who pay their taxes. They are people who contribute to the things that are so important and vital to our community. Our 2 hospitals, the University of Montana, our education system. That's what small business does. Everyone who is a business person in this room, please stand up. Everyone from local government or from state, nope, don't be shy. Stay standing, you're good, you're all good. Okay. Everyone from federal, state, or local government who is part of the collaborative effort that makes business so wonderful in Missoula. Would you please stand up? All right. And anyone who hasn't stood up, who's part of business, whether you're part of an organization, a wonderful organization like the Chamber of Commerce, or the Missoula Economic Partnership, or the Missoula Downtown Association, or any nonprofit, would you please stand up? Okay? All right. All right. And if you're still sitting, just stand up anyway. All right? Here's, no. It's a wonderful thing about being in control. All right. You standing together, each and every one of you standing together, is Missoula. Thank you for coming. All right, I'd like to introduce the head table. To my right is John Hart, Regional Advocate of the Small Business Association, also cabin dweller, cow dog keeper, and adventurer. John, so we'll talk more about you in just a minute. Yeah, next to John is Barbara Wagner. She's a senior economist, Research and Analysis Bureau of the Montana Department of Labor and Industry, a native Montanan, a skier, lots of family ties in Missoula, a hiker, and a guitarist. You're wonderful. Barbara, thank you for coming. Dave Glaser, how are you? Yeah, I've got some stuff on you too. So Dave is the best small business expert in the state of Montana. He's also a river rat, a family man, 2 daughters, wonderful wife. Thank you for coming. And then Michael Braun. I've got a secret about you, Michael. All right. He's a specialist in family-owned startups, a car dealership, ranches, restaurants, and on and on and on. Michael also has a love affair with Montana and families, right? So that is our group of panelists. First panelist up is Mr. John Hart. John, why don't you come up, stand next to me here. So John is the regional advocate for Region Number 8, covering the states of Colorado, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming. Mr. Hart is the chief counsel for Advocacy's direct link to small business owners, state and local government agencies, state legislators, trade associations, and small business organizations throughout the region. Hart was appointed to his post in January of 2011. And guess what? He got invited to the inaugural ball and came to Montana instead. Thank you, John, for doing that. Hart served as a director of the Asset Management Planning and Development for the Housing Authority of Baltimore in Maryland, where he oversaw project management for city-owned housing and housing development. He was a business affairs coordinator, multimedia, and bank financing analyst in Los Angeles, where he advised on over $1.5 billion on current multimedia joint venture projects. He has served as a consultant in numerous small business startups, focusing on venture financing. He has his Juris Doctorate degree from Loyola Law School in Los Angeles and a master's degree in business administration from the University of Colorado. And the Office of Advocacy of the U.S. Small Business Administration is an independent voice for small businesses within the federal government. The presidency appointed chief counsel for advocacy advances the views, concerns, and interests of small business before Congress, the White House, federal agencies, federal courts, state policymakers, regional advocates, and an office in Washington, D.C. support the chief counsel's efforts. To learn more, go to their website. Mr. John Hart.
Unfortunately, everything that he said is true. There's a lot more that I won't go into. Needless to say, I've done a lot of traveling and done a lot of work. But again, my name is John Hart. I'm the regional advocate. Everyone's asking what that is. I'd also like to say I have, starting up here, I don't want to focus on the negatives. I have 4 things going against me. I'm talking while you guys are eating lunch or finishing up lunch. I'm a lawyer. I'm from the federal government. I'm here to talk about regulations. So I got a lot going against me. I'm going to try and make it fun and talk fast. And highlight a few key points here as to why I'm here and why it's important I'm here. I think, like Nick said, I forego going back east and all the pomp and celebration. I think it was a wonderful time. For me, I wanted to get out, and there's a lot of work on small business development that I think I can hopefully help with and highlight and illuminate some of the things that we do. Office of Advocacy, SBA proper, I want to bring a few key people. Wayne, are you here? There's Wayne Gardella right here. He was just appointed as a district director for SBA here in all of Montana. Wayne's been here about a week. Please go talk to Wayne, introduce yourself. Wayne's going to be spearheading the SBA's effort in Montana and the federal effort. Rena Carlson in the back. Rena, wave your hand at least. Our lending relations specialist. And they're the people here that are helping get out the idea of federal resources to the small business community. And that was my point. I gave an interview this morning. I was talking about it. It's really important and to highlight what resources are available for the small business community that the SBA has to offer. I will make a quick distinction. I say Office of Advocacy, which is I work for. Dr. Winslow Sargent is the Chief Counsel for Advocacy. He reports directly to the President of the United States. He also reports to the White House Business Council on anything and everything to do with small business growth. SBA, we are affiliated with the Small Business Administration. The way I break it out is SBA proper handles credit, counseling, contracting, and disaster relief, the 3 C's and the D. And I'll talk really quickly about that because I don't want to take up my 20 minutes here. Our office handles regulation and research, and like I said, regulation has the ability to be kind of a negative word. But like I've talked to people in the past, regulation to me is about protecting the public and protecting the private citizens and the small businesses. Now, protecting them, the idea is that we want to make sure that regulations are fair, and we want to make sure that they're not overburdensome. So I'm going to go into a few slides really quick. I want to highlight a few key points. I brought with me some research statistics that you will see online if you go to sba.gov/advocacy. I have some copies on our table, but you can download everything. We have what's called frequently asked questions on small business. 99.7% of all business entities are small businesses that we classify, under 500 employees. That's 64% of net new private sector jobs. That is a huge component. And I think from what I said, our chief counsel, my boss, understands that the administration doesn't take this lightly. This is a huge, huge component that we want to keep highlighting and keep seeing what we can do and put forward any amount of federal resources we can. And part of that is for me to discuss these issues, but I also need to take back feedback. So I'm going to get into that in a minute, but I'm going to go through my slides here really quick. And again, being very cognizant. I think Nick will hit me with a cookie or something if I'm running over time. So real quick, if you notice on the slides, the first sentence to me says it all. I like to boil things down real easy. Unfortunately, I am a lawyer, but I like to talk break things down really simple. Small businesses' voice in the federal regulatory process, period. Real straightforward, real easy. There are 56 federal regulatory issuing agencies from any combination of letters of the alphabet. FDA, EPA, IRS, you name it, SEC, 56 federal regulatory issuing agencies. The congressional legislation, and even White House authority. That's our universe. That's what when I say federal regulatory process, that's where we operate. Small business voice. We don't represent the federal government, we represent the small business. Anytime there is any new pending federal regulation, congressional legislation, or even White House executive authority, we have the ability to issue comment and work with them, work with the attorneys, work with congressional staff, work with senators, congressmen as it stands, even the White House, on making sure that anything that is coming out of Washington that is potentially going to impact the small business community we make sure that they have the ability and have a say in there so that it's not overly burdensome and not overly impactful. Barriers to entry, as we talked about, the companies that want to start up, companies that want to exist. So let me start working through here. You can see there's my addresses down there. I'm based in Denver, Colorado. Again, Federal Region 8, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, North and South Dakota. I love it. I'm from the West. I think as Nick said, I live in a little cabin up in the mountains. I've got a couple cow dogs. I go fishing and skiing and hiking and biking a lot. So I love it out here. But if you look, sba.gov/advocacy, all of our information is up there. My email address is on there, john.hart@sba.gov. Will that go? Oh, there we go. U.S. small business. I'm going to talk fast. I hope it doesn't bother people. I hope it won't impact the digestion of your food. But I have a lot of slides here. I'm going to go kind of quick. I will save a lot of the questions for afterwards for a Q&A period. Plus, I'm here all afternoon. So please come find me, beat me up a little bit. SBA, like I said, capital, counseling, contracting, disaster relief. That's a huge component right there. Again, Wayne's going to be handling a lot of that, Wayne and Rena. Those are some of the key critical areas. We handle regulation and research. Research really quick. We are the small business data clearinghouse for the federal government. Anything and everything that pertains to small business data, these FAQs, we have, I have some here. There's also on the table. The state profiles has a breakdown of Montana by industry, by small business ownership, women-owned small business, veteran, minority, Native American. It's all right there. It's all free. Go to our website. You can download it too. Just an FYI if it's there. Let me keep going. Again, Office of Advocacy really quick. We were established initially in 1976. Executive authority amended by the establishing of what's called the RFA, Regulatory Flexibility Act, requires federal agencies, Congress, and the White House to enact a small business review. This is how important this is. And we beat up, in a sense, Congress. We beat up federal agencies. We beat up the White House to make sure they understand how important small businesses are to maintaining growing of our economy, not just locally here in Montana, across the rest of the country. So that's pretty important. Regulatory Flexibility Act, in a sense, was amended by the SBREEF Act later. I think it's up here. That gives us the ability to comment, gives us the ability to work with us. It's our power. It's our teeth. Small office. We have 50 people. Everyone talks about the size of government. We have 50 people, a small team of economists, small team of lawyers. Advocacy team, chief counsel, deputy counsel, like I just said. Team of attorneys, we have 10 regional advocates like me. My job, I think like Nick highlighted, I'm the eyes and ears for the chief counsel. I'm here to let people know when pending regulations come out, when EPA, FDA, IRS, anyone makes changes, we try and disseminate that information to the public. The small business owners, as I like to say, don't need to sit and read every day what we have to read. You want to see how, I hate to say how boring my job is. You want to go read the Federal Register every day. I know I talked to JJ about this. You talk about what's coming out, being a lawyer in Washington. Every day, the amount of new and proposed changes to legislation, it gets kind of crazy. And I have to read through it every day. And what I want to do is parse through it so you don't have to. I don't want the small businesses to have to read Federal Register every day. It's important for us to read through it, parse out what needs to be known, what needs to get out to the people, so small business owners can run their business. Research, like I said, here's some key national and state economic profiles. We do a 300 small business economy book, status of small businesses in the federal economy. It's all PDF file. You can go onto our website. You go to sba.gov or .gov/advocacy. It's all there. Regulations. This is our bread and butter. Like I said earlier, I kind of highlighted a lot of it. Anytime 56 federal regulatory issuing agencies, Congress, White House, anytime anybody issues anything, we have the ability to comment on it. We can and will. That's important because, like I said, our office doesn't represent the government. We represent small business because a lot of times we take action, we comment against what has been proposed by the federal agencies. So I think that's important to know. Let me go through a few key points. I'm going to highlight some key ideas, and again, without taking too much time getting into the nitty-gritty, because there's some important things here that I wanted to highlight. These just came out recently. IRS is in conjunction with the SBA, issued new home-based employees claim on home office tax deduction, up to $1,500 a year. By the way, these slides are going to be available. Kimberly, if she's here, she has the file. If you ever want to see these slides, I'm perfectly willing to either email them to you or I think Kimberly's around. I don't see her. So if you don't get anything on here, okay, we can get it to you. So if you get like a point on here, if I'm flashing through, then do it. This is a new change in IRS home office tax deduction. It's kind of small, but I thought it was important to highlight because it's something that the SBA is trying to push in conjunction with the IRS. So here's the other one, government contracting. There's a new called EZ RFP. It's again, changes U.S. Small Business Administration in conjunction with the White House Presidential Fellows Initiative. It's a change. It's an idea to make it easier for companies to interact with government services and contracts. There's a website up here. If you see, it's rfpez.sba.gov. It's on the website. Talks a lot about how much easier it is to get into the system to apply for smaller contracts from $3,000 to $150,000. This just came out last week. I haven't had time to look at it, but I wanted to highlight it. They are part of our outreach program. Our outreach offices with advocacy and SBA proper are pushing this. I think that's important to know. Here's another one. Change in the fiscal year 13 National Defense Authorization Act reissued changes to appropriating funds for military activities for contracting. Again, a few key points in here. You can see there are changes to women-owned small business contracting programs, surety bond programs. There's an institution of a new mentor protege programs. These are for companies that are engaged in small business contracting, government contracting small businesses quite a bit. Real quick on a side note, federal government spends over $500 billion a year, $500 billion in outsourcing in government. There is a requirement that 22% of that goes to small businesses broken out further into women-owned small businesses, minority and veteran-owned small businesses. I personally, I can't believe it's only 22%. I think it ought to be a lot higher. This covers everything from airplanes to submarines to smaller contracts. But the numbers that I cited earlier, 99% of small business entities, or of all business entities are small business, 64% of new hires. Government still, like I said, 22%. I'm throwing my employer under the bus, but like I said, 22%, and they still have a hard time meeting that. But the National Defense Authorization Act speaks to a lot of the government contract. How am I doing on time? Government contracting services. Okay. Again, if I'm talking too fast, then come beat me up afterwards. Comments. I'm going to go through a few examples. I'm not going to get into too much in depth because some of this stuff does get. That's how much time I've left. Oh, a lot. It's actually more than I thought. That's okay. Because, like I said, we cover everything, and here's a big one. The Consumer Finance Protection Bureau is what has come out of also changes, new pending regulations from Dodd-Frank to financial lending institutions. This is what I've mentioned this earlier. A lot of people argue about, well, is it needed? Is CFPB needed? It's just more government oversight. It's more government regulation. Dodd-Frank is overreaching. Our office is not partisan. I can't sit here and say, well, yeah, it sucks, or no, it doesn't. We try and make sure it's fair, and especially when it comes to small businesses. Dodd-Frank, Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, is there to help protect the consumers and to protect the some of the small businesses who are engaged in lending on both sides, whether they're lending and mortgage disclosures is another part of this that is highlighted here. When CFPB proposes new changes to consumer finance lending or small business lending, or when Dodd-Frank, when new implementations of Dodd-Frank come about, they will get posted. We will comment. I don't have a staff. We have a small office, like I said, and I cover 6 states, and I cover every single industry. So I try and get out as much information as I can. But part of what this is to let the small business owners and operators here in Missoula and the state know that you can always contact me or contact my office, see what's coming down, whether if you're a financial institution or have what I call a stakeholder in it. You have the ability to understand how this is going to impact and comment back. And this is, again, just an example of one of the areas we have been involved in is CFPB and Dodd-Frank. And you can see there's a few key points I kind of wanted to move on. I'm more than happy to talk to people afterwards about this. So there's FAR Council. There's changes in small business set-asides for R&D contracts. There are changes in, again, it goes into a lot of the small businesses that are involved in R&D some of the SBIR standards have been extended, expanded, financed. I think I was talking to someone earlier about the federal government's commitment to SBIR and to some of the small business set-aside programs, which would be big. There we go. And I think a lot of people question it, and given what's going on, the budgetary talks and so forth, I can't comment directly on the budget because I don't know. I mean, I don't know about the debt. You know, I get a lot of questions about debt and budget and so forth. I can comment that our interaction with a lot of the White House Business Council and so forth is there is still a lot of commitment to extending the SBIR programs, re-extending, refinancing. I know that is so far from what I hear is that will not change anytime soon. Again, changes in SBIR policy directives. I want to go on to, here's another one that, got it. I'm going to cut that a little short, but U.S. patent and trade changes were big in the last 2 years. Leahy-Smith Act implemented what's called, the Leahy-Smith bill implemented what's called the American Invest Act, which gave a broad and sweeping change of the patent and trade rules, something that hadn't been done in decades. For example, I've worked with a lot of high-tech companies in and around Colorado and Wyoming. One of the big issues that people talk about, at the time before Leahy-Smith was implemented, there were over 700,000 patent applications backlogged. 700,000, closing in on that, it was growing. And the average wait time for patent review was anywhere from 4.5 to 5 years. Since AIA has been implemented and the patent rules have been changed, that has come down to, that number at one point this time last year was just over 500,000. I think it's just under 250 to 300,000 now. The backlog of applications, they're working down fast. Patent review time now is under 18 months. The goal is in another year is to get that down to under 90 days. And that for the small business patent stakeholder and stakeholder community through a lot of the colleges I've talked to and a lot of the, like the National Renewable Energy Lab, a lot of the institutions that get involved in patent development, that has been a big help to the small business communities who get involved in that. And again, I'm highlighting this specifically, but also in general is a commitment from Congress and the federal government to help change some of the innovation rules, help reform some of the regulations and rules to allow the small businesses to grow, allow them to get patents commercially viable quicker, to get them out into the mainstream as quick as they can, get product and services out as fast as they can. USPTO also instituted they initially said 4 new satellite offices. Detroit was announced first, Colorado, Dallas, and San Francisco. So that's going to be a huge expansion of patent and trade rules. Was that me? No. Again, we were working with the Patent and Trade Office as a subset of Department of Commerce and making sure that a lot of the rules, the first to file versus the first to invent, had small business representation and support in there. Hold on. Did it go? Lost the computer. Is it gone? I'll wing it. All right. Again, a lot of these I'm just highlighting. Changes in size standards. SBA, the size and standard divisions for government contracting is in the SBA office as well. And in the last 2 years, there were sweeping changes in NACE code size standards for those small businesses bidding on government contracts. We were instrumental in working with the SBA on making sure that the size standards accurately reflected the small business interests and community in how the industries were growing and changing, how they were not changing, given the recent economic recession. So that was another one, again, highlighting a few key points. If you go to our website, we have what's called regulatory alerts, sba.gov/advocacy. Anytime the pending changes coming due that are going to have the impact on small businesses, we like to post them up there. again, the point is that you as small business owners shouldn't have to be logging in and checking our website once a week or once a day or whenever to see, well, gee, I wonder when that EPA rule or maybe the IRS will change these tax rules or they're going to implement something new, something drastic or burdensome. It's difficult for us to get that word out, and we try as much as we can. The second part of this is that I want everyone, the small business owners, to know the pending changes in federal regulation, but we also need to get your feedback. As I've mentioned a couple times earlier this morning, there's a bunch of guys, lawyers and economists who are probably very smart, very bright, sitting in Washington, who are making these proposals and changes that don't really know what's going on out in the communities here in Missoula and in the rest of the state. And they need to know. And good part of what our office does is that we try and help them know that, so that when the size and standards guy, who's a very good economist, he's making changes to architecture and engineering or science and standards, or any other type of small business NACE code numbers, he knows that his little idea to say, I think it ought to be here, doesn't really, he needs to know what the impact is going to be to the small business community here. So we try and help that. And that's a lot, again, a good example of how, one area that we do it and one area that we don't. I'll wrap up here in a few minutes if that's okay. Okay, I got 5, but I may wrap up a little quick. I want to get back to, again, general themes. I talked about this morning, and a few other people I've talked to this afternoon. Much like today, I wanted to get up and get the word out with the Missoula Chamber, with the Small Business Fair here, is that there are a tremendous amount of resources available. Federal government has a tremendous amount of resources. SBA we have these resources that people know about. I still go out and meet with small businesses around, this region, in some of the states I've met, or people I meet in interaction, and they don't know. Well, SBA, I don't know what that is. I don't know what they do. I don't know what they offer. But I'm a small business that needs help, and I need some instruction on how to put my business plan together, how to put a marketing plan, or how to expand my business, how to start my business, how to grow. People say, well, I don't understand about exporting. What do I do? How do I go about it? We have a lot of that. Like I've mentioned, the 3 C's and D, the credit counseling contracting that SBA proper holds, and the kind of regulatory relief that our office directly holds. I like to push, again, this idea that there are these resources that are available, and a lot of the community resources and state resources are all here. That was the good part about having this fair and this outreach, and hopefully this will continue, and you guys will do this once a year, twice a year, however often it needs to be done, so that people know that there is public commitment from the federal government, commitment from state government, from other agencies, again, from loans, contracting, regulatory relief, and reform. I will, I know I have a few minutes left, but I may run it, because what I'd like to do is have more time for Q&A, if that's possible. So anyway, I'm done. Again, we'll do some Q&A after we go through the talk here. Please feel free to ask me anything you want. I'm here for afterwards for a couple hours, so I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. I've got business cards. I've got a lot of information, like I mentioned here, that you're perfectly willing to get. So thank you.
So I got to spend a little bit of time with Mr. Hart this morning, actually quite a bit of time, and there's a couple things I'd like to share with you. Is that, yeah, you're okay. Yeah, you're good. When the projector went down, I thought we're going to have to get Shane Klaus from Stopping Ground to come up and actually help with your program. But what's really interesting to me is right here is our advocate for the federal government. This isn't the federal government. This is our advocate for the federal government. Right back there is Pink Grizzly, family-owned, small business, wonderful group of people, right? Right here is another part of that business, Sean Klaus, Board of Directors for the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce. I look around the room. I see large and small businesses, the fabric, the business fabric of Missoula. John's our advocate. He cares, he's effective, and he's knowledgeable. Already this morning, we talked about a little issue in City Lake that deals with air pollution regulations, wood stoves, and a potential lumber mill that could be affected by regulation. So use John. All right, you're done.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. You don't have to clap for him again. You get another shot at him in a minute. All right, what I'd like to do now is to make sure we thank the chamber staff, Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce, Kim, and all your staff. Board of Directors are here. It's just a great organization. They really care about Missoula businesses, and you know what? You businesses support the chamber, and we really appreciate that. My next speaker is Barbara. Barbara, you want to come up? So Barbara Wagner is a senior economist with the Montana Department of Labor and Industry, providing research and information on Montana's labor market to policymakers, media, and the public. Her research includes diverse topics such as green jobs, the job retention of newly hired workers, business survival rates, the aging workforce, sorry, and the economic impact of restoration. Her previous work experience includes research positions with the U.S. Senate, the Montana Department of Revenue, and the University of Minnesota. Barbara's published research on the healthiness of school meals won the Outstanding RAE Article Award from the Agriculture and Applied Economics Association. She's also won regional awards for her labor market publications. She holds a BA with honors in economics and political science from the College of St. Benedict St. John's, the University of Minnesota, and an MS in applied economics from the University of Minnesota. A Montana native with ties to the Tremper family here in Missoula. Barbara also serves as race chair for the Montana Race for the Cure, is a founder and officer of the Helena Young Professionals, and serves as a board member on the Employee Investment Advisory Board for the State Retirement Systems. She's also formed an informal lunch group with other economists in the state to improve communication and productivity across agencies. In her free time, Barbara enjoys hiking, home improvement, projects, floating, skiing, politics, trap shooting, playing the guitar, and Barbara Wagner, you're up. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a really long introduction. Sometimes when you're an economist, you have to really make yourself sound interesting. So you put in a lot of stuff like that I play the guitar. To be honest, my mom just gave me a bass guitar for Christmas. I don't really know how to play the guitar, but I'm learning. Thanks for having me here today. I really appreciate coming to Missoula. Everyone loves to come to Missoula. I also really appreciate getting out of Helena during the legislative session. And I have two goals for my presentation today. The first is to kind of show off some of the resources we have available at the Department of Labor for businesses, both small businesses and all other types of businesses, educators. Like, for example, we make these little county flyers that have economic data that might help you put together some market research or something. They're very popular. And I'll kind of highlight some more throughout my presentation. The second goal I have is to kind of describe about how small businesses fit into our Montana economy as a whole, particularly the economy of the Northwest region with Missoula. And so let's see if I can get this started. Well, I think all of you know we've had a recession in the last few years. I'm not telling anyone something they don't know there, but this chart shows the U.S. and Montana unemployment rates since the last recession, well, actually since 2000. Both of the 2001 recession and the most recent recession are shown there in gray. Our unemployment rate has outperformed the U.S. rate since the 2001 recession. We've now hit the top, was about 7% in Montana. We have now started to come down. We've been having very strong job growth throughout the state over the last year and a half that has really brought our unemployment rate down. However, as all of you know here in the Northwest, the recession has had very disparate impacts across the state. And the Northwest region is one of the worst areas of the state. And even in our recovery, this area of the state has had slower job growth than the remainder of the state. Particularly the Bakken region has been a very fast adder of jobs, and the Bozeman region has been adding tons of jobs. Their job growth is actually much faster than I expected coming out of the recession. Now, that doesn't mean that Missoula is doing bad. Missoula has definitely stabilized and you're adding jobs, but you're just not adding jobs, sorry, have to point that way, as fast as you were before the recession. This chart shows the job growth by region for every year during the recession and the recovery, along with some projections that we have for future years. Now, the Northwest region is shown in the blue line on the chart, right there, and So the Northwest actually entered the recession sooner than every other part of the state. You've got some decreases in 2008. Now, this is because the Northwest had a high concentration of construction employment and also because of the wood products industry. That was the housing market, and the construction industry were the first things that were hit during the recession, and the rest of the economy followed once we started to have the financial crisis. Other businesses were impacted. But here in the Northwest, you started to have job losses as early as 2008. And see how huge those job losses were in 2009. Over 8,000 jobs lost in 1 year in this region. Now, you have come back into job growth. In 2011, we have a very small, that blue line is just peaking right above zero. But as you can tell, that's not enough to really make up for the large job losses before. And in the next few years, in 2013 and 14, we expect those jobs to start to come back again, but again, slower job growth. Part of that is because of the loss of the wood products industry. In the future years, we do expect this region to continue to be a leader in our state's economy in terms of adding jobs, but there is going to be a bit of a transition. Now, I can see all your sad faces out there. They don't call economics the dismal science for no reason. But, you know, in addition to having a challenge, we also have opportunities. This chart actually shows the economy, the industries of the Northwest, in what they've done during the recession and in the recovery period. And the size of the bubble is how big that industry is in terms of jobs. And everything and I hope to be able to, on this side of that vertical axis, are industries that added jobs during the recession. So the healthcare industry added jobs during the recession, so did the government. And this is something that's different about Missoula region versus the rest of the state. You guys also added a lot of business services jobs during the recession. The rest of Montana is not like that. And business services is kind of a big industry. It includes administrative services like accounting, payroll firms, temporary employment firms. It includes janitorial services. It also includes professional and technical firms like lawyers and accountants and engineers. So that is something that you seem to have a good concentration of, and we hope to continue to see job growth in that area in the future. Now, continuing to explain what this chart means, I know it's a little confusing. If you're above the horizontal axis, that means that you've added jobs during the recovery. That means since 2010, you've been adding jobs. So the big one here to look at is the manufacturing. Now, manufacturing is important, particularly the wood products manufacturing, because it's an exporting industry. And you get dollars from outside the state, and you bring it into the Missoula area in the Northwest, and that helps drive growth in the other industries. Well, we've had a lot of job losses and a lot of sales losses for the wood products industry, and we expect some of that to come back. In fact, that manufacturing added jobs over the last year. But the amount of jobs added is about a couple hundred, and the amount of jobs lost during the recession is a couple thousand. So we're going to be that still is a loss of income for the community. Now again, challenges are also opportunities. I think that this is one area which small businesses can really have the opportunity to come in and have some replacement businesses in terms of replacing those export dollars. Now, in the future, this is likely going to happen. It could be your business, it could be another person's business, but I think that there's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs to come in and increase the exports of this Missoula region, and that will help drive growth in all of the other industries. So how does small business fit into that? Well, mostly it is, there's the opportunity for new businesses to come in and help replace the lost jobs. We also have, we always hear things like small business is the backbone of the Montana economy. It's a fairly common talking point. And that is true and isn't true in very different ways. And let me explain what I mean by that. Montana has a lot of small businesses. And in fact, the SBA defines small business as basically anything less than 500. Nearly all of Montana's businesses fit into that category. We define small business usually by 20 or less employees. So overall, we just really have small businesses in the state of Montana.
This chart shows how the big bar that's over 65% of shows the percentage of establishments in the state by size. So 65% of our businesses are less than 5 employees. And you can barely see the over 100 and over 250. In addition to those establishments shown on the chart, we have a lot of non-employers. Now, the Department of Labor doesn't talk a lot about non-employers. Non-employers are basically self-employed individuals who may hire independent contractors, but they don't hire workers. So there are also businesses out there like that that are not included on the charts that I'll be showing. So while we have a lot of small businesses, and that's what most of our businesses are, that's not where most of our employment is. Most of our employment is in big business. Now, this may be pretty obvious. If they were big business and they had a lot of jobs, they wouldn't be small businesses anymore, right? But, sometimes being an economist is also about pointing out the obvious. So most of our employment and wages are actually in these larger businesses, larger than 50. And what this ends up being is that large businesses actually end up paying higher pay and benefits than smaller businesses. And so those with over 100 employees have much higher average wages than small businesses do. And it's not just pay, it's also compensation of other ways like healthcare benefits. This chart actually comes from one of our Economy at a Glance. Now here's my sales pitch. We produce these monthly newsletters. They're available over email. We send them out every month. I encourage you to sign up. They have little articles. This particular chart came from one on how many of our employees are covered by health insurance in the state. So this chart indicates that in Montana, if you have 100 or more employees, nearly 100% of firms offer health insurance to their employees. But smaller firms often don't offer health insurance because it's very costly for them to afford. And only, I can't even see the number from over here, 31% of firms less than 10 employees offer health insurance. So the question is, if big business has all the jobs and they pay more, why is it that we're really worried about small business? And we certainly are. We have conferences about them, right? So the question is that the answer is that new businesses drive growth out of the recessions, and in fact drive growth for most periods, but particularly during the recessions. This chart shows the existing firms in 2006 and what happened to their employment during the recession period. And it's indexed to their employment in 2006 so that, 2006 employment levels were 100%, and then where did they go from there? You see all these lines point downwards. So existing firms, 2006 firms, actually have all lost employment during the recession. I guess not too much of a surprise. And I've separated them out by size class. It's actually the big business that has lost a fewer percentage of their employment. They're down. And then those that are the smaller firms have actually lost more. So they haven't been as good during the recession. If you're a smaller firm, you've been hit worse than the bigger firms. However, let's look at new firms. These are new jobs added by new firms that were created in 07, 08, 09, 10, and 11. They've been continuously adding new jobs to the economy. This is the net jobs from any new businesses in the state. They've added over 60,000 jobs to the Montana economy over the last 5 years. So it's really these new jobs and new firms that are startup firms that are driving our economy and our economic growth at this point. So how is Montana doing? This chart shows Montana's business births and deaths and shows kind of what our startup rates really are in Montana. And you can see that the recession had a very large impact on our business deaths in particular. That's what's shown in the blue line. And also we've reduced the number of business birth rates in Montana during the recession period, but we are heading back up again, starting to see some new business births rates in Montana coming back up again, which is great. This chart shows business birth rates before the recession and after the recession by industry. And it's really hard to see, actually, but there's little pies on the side That shows what percentage of business startups are in each industry. Despite the fact that construction has not been doing very well in the last few years, it still is the industry that makes up the largest portion of our startups. That's where most of them are. Now, their success rate actually has cut down significantly since the recession. The yellow lines are the blue lines are before the recession, and the yellow lines are after the recession. This is actually a chart that's in one of our EAG, and you're interested in learning more, I'd really encourage you to visit our website, because I'm going to cover it really quickly here, and take a look at how Missoula is doing. So this chart shows all of the business birth rates by county, and Missoula County is actually in the second category that's higher than most of the other state. The counties in the highest are actually pretty small counties, so when you have even like 5 startups, that gives a very high percentage. So in terms of new business births, Missoula is doing pretty good. The problem with Missoula comes across when you look at the net business birth rates, and this takes the birth rate minus the firms that died, right? Now, it turns out that Missoula falls into lower categories with this. In fact, there's been a net loss of businesses during this time period. Now, that was the recession time period. This was the worst part of the state in the recession, but this does seem to suggest that while we're doing a really great job of starting new businesses in Missoula, there also needs to be some additional support to keep those businesses growing in the future. And the whole point of adding those small businesses to the community is to grow them larger, and so that they can add better jobs and more wages to our economy. So just to sum up things, small businesses have the opportunity to rejuvenate the Montana economy, particularly ones that are adding new exporting firms to the economy would be great to really drive job growth in the region. While there are lower wages and benefits in small businesses, there are also ways that small businesses have to keep their workers happy, like flexible work hours, and everybody likes the lack of bureaucracy in a small business as well. So that's not necessarily a negative, but it is something that we know as we grow a firm, that's something that will help us out as we get these startups to be larger firms. So Missoula County comparatively has a high business birth rate, but it also has a high failure rate. That's partly due to the recession, but we need some more research on that to see if there's ways that we can protect our existing businesses and new startups. And also, I always need to say this, some businesses are not designed to grow. It's kind of a picking the right horse sort of deal. A lot of small businesses are designed just to make some retirement income or some family income, and are not necessarily designed to big businesses. And that's something we should all keep in mind as we're starting to develop businesses in our state. So I've covered a lot of ground in this. We do have a lot of the charts on the business birth rates and deaths we get attention on. That was an EAG article that we have available on our website. We also have a really great job service staff here in Missoula, so they can help you access any of the information and resources or charts that I've shown you today. And I hope you find it helpful. Thank you.
This is like the Hotel California. You can just never leave, Barbara. So Barbara threw out some terms, economist terms. We like to make assumptions, right? And everything you talked about was based on assumptions. We have another term that economists use, and it's called comparative advantage. What's a comparative advantage? A comparative advantage happens when you know something that your competition doesn't know. Or if you know something you can share in your region that makes your region better than the next region, right? And so what we're about today is comparative advantage. And so what John has given you is information about the Small Business Administration, right? He's our advocate, right? He cares. What Barbara has given us from sort of a Missoula family ties perspective, a native Missoulian, is what the economy looks like in stark reality, right? But what she gives us, the information she gives us, gives each and every one of us a comparative advantage. It gives us the knowledge to look at the future honestly, right? And form the right partnerships so we can move forward in our business. And Barbara, thank you so much. All right. Our next speaker, Dave Glaser, needs no introduction, but come on up, Dave, and we'll see what we can do. What? I hate to do an introduction without you. All right, Dave is the president of Montana CDC and works out of our Missoula office. Montana CDC is a statewide, not-for-profit business lender that provides capital and consulting to nearly bankable businesses. You'll talk to us about nearly bankable businesses, I'm sure. Before joining Montana CDC in 2007, Dave worked in a number of capacities in small businesses in Montana and elsewhere in the West. Dave serves on the Opportunity Finance Network Board of Directors, as well as on the advisory board for the Montana Small Business Development Center Network. Before finishing his master's degree, Dave traveled extensively, teaching whitewater kayaking, crewing on sailboats, and guiding backcountry and river expeditions throughout the world. Dave and his wife live in Missoula and are the proud parents of 2 twin girls. You have a lot in common with everybody in the room. Mr. Dave Glaser.
I'm going to be fairly short-winded today. It's a little unnerving to be called the expert in anything except maybe eating donuts. So I'm a little uncomfortably called the state's small business expert. I have 2 goals today for my remarks as well. One is to give a perspective. We work with hundreds and hundreds of businesses every year from across the state. And so I'd like to give you some of the hard-learned lessons that we see in businesses time and time again. So I'm going to shrink our perspective to the business level. And then we also see lots and lots of opportunities and risks across the state in our work. And so I'll also share some of the things that we're seeing happening all over the state, but also right here in Missoula. We are an SBA partner and are very appreciative of the SBA's support in this state. I can tell you, I was just in Washington, D.C., and I was talking with some of my colleagues from across the country and remarking how wonderful the support is from the SBA in Montana, and they didn't have the same experience in their states. We are really lucky to have the close connection that we have between each other in this state and the ability to just pick up the phone and usually know the person we're talking to on the other end. Really big advantage for our communities in our state. So, opportunities and challenges that we're seeing across the state. The first one, and this is specific to Missoula, Bozeman also has this luxury. We have an incredibly good workforce in this city. We just hired 4 new people in our company, and I felt really good about the talent that's out there and the talent that's seeking employment. And it makes it a lot easier to run a great company when you have incredibly good people working for you. Really good advantage for Missoula in particular, because you don't see that in other communities in the state. Bozeman you do for sure, and that's directly tied to our wonderful university system and the students that are coming out of the university ready to get things done. So one of the things that we do in our company is we have an internship program. We bring in students in their last year and have them work as interns, and then many of them end up being staff later on. So highly encourage that interaction. It's relatively easy to start a business in this state compared to other states. I know sometimes it doesn't feel this way, but the regulatory environment when it comes to small business in Montana is pretty friendly to small business. So we're a small state. We're basically one long main street between here and the eastern border. And it's pretty easy to have 2 degrees of separation. You know, Kevin Bacon has 6 degrees. Montana has 2 degrees of separation between each other. And so it makes it really easy. I'll share an example, actually. Kim Luttrell. I went to Lewistown, Montana, to do some business development. I was speaking with a banker in Lewistown who said, I checked up on you before you came, because I made an appointment. I checked up on you before you came. I called my sister-in-law, I think it was, just to see if you were on the up and up. It's like, whoa, right? We live in a small state. And it was Kim Luttrell that he called to make sure that I was okay. I was going to stick against the wall. So that is an incredibly good advantage, and that's a perfect example. as a small business, if you're looking for expansion markets or perhaps some talent for your staff or strategic partners in the state, it is really great to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody in Billings or wherever and be able to make that immediate connection. I'm not from Montana. I grew up in another state. I went to the University of Colorado. And it's not like that there. It is much harder to get business done because it's so much harder to make those connections. Big competitive advantage for our state, and if you aren't capitalizing on it, you should. So, one of our other great advantages, opportunities in the state is that we are a get it done, roll up your sleeves, make it happen type of people. We are. We see a problem and we go after it and we get it done. I lost my job, I need to start a business, I'm going to go start that business. This is a really great attribute. And people remark about us around the country because of that get it done attitude. So two of the risks that are directly associated with the opportunities. First is that we are isolated from major markets and from each other. So in our business, I'm constantly flying outside the state, mostly to find investment capital and other things. It's a pain. It's really hard to get out of the state and get to those markets. I often have 2 or 3 connections where everybody else I'm competing against has maybe 1 or a direct flight. So we have to work harder or be smarter in the way that we are accessing those other markets. Separation from each other is something that we see in our work. So Billings, Bozeman, Butte, Missoula, right? We're connected by a highway. But we're islands separated by mountain ranges. Makes it really hard, actually, especially in the winter, to get back and forth, to do commerce. Those communities end up insularizing themselves and working inside rather than reaching out and making connections. And we see that as a big risk to the state. It's so important for the communities in the state to be working ever more closely together. We have an office in Bozeman. One of the ways we've overcome that geographic barrier is to make our connection very real. We have a video conferencing system that allows us to have virtual meetings every single day. I see the people in Bozeman, the people in Bozeman see me. And it really makes a big difference. What? No. All right, so some silver bullets, some things that we see in businesses that are either successful or not successful, things they're doing, best practices or not so best practices when it comes to running a small business. So, understanding your competition in your market. If you aren't paying close attention constantly to who's entering the market as your potential competitor, understanding your competitors, right? And then potentially working with them in strategic partnerships, not just throwing up a wall. But one other important thing, and it's a fine line, is not looking over your shoulder constantly, right? Understand your market and go. And this is something we see businesses frequently don't have the data that they need in order to make good decisions, even about not just to say their market, but also their competition. And so staying on top of that and tapping the resources that are out there that can provide you that data. I've run a number of small businesses in my time. In fact, I was reflecting on small business in my life before this talk. I have only ever worked for not a small business once. I was an intern at Waste Management Incorporated. It's the only time I've not worked for a small business. And I gotta say, it was rough working at Waste Management as an intern. It's not nearly as fun as working for small business. Anyway, another silver bullet. We see this happen frequently. Small business owners tend to silo themselves. They aren't required to have a board of directors. right? They're not publicly traded. They're not required to have mentors. They're not required to listen to anybody. But the best small business owners that we know sometimes will have a volunteer board of directors. They'll ask people to serve as their board of directors so they can float ideas past them. They're constantly reaching out to external opinions, whether that be a consultant, whatever, so that they're not just drinking their own Kool-Aid and making decisions in a silo. Big one. That's a big one. Mentors are also great. I have 5 mentors across the country who are bigger, better, faster, smarter than me, and I call them frequently to run stuff past them. What do you think about this? 10 years ago, you were in my position. What did you do that was really smart to get ahead? Make projections. Make financial projections once a year. And I know it stinks, man. It stinks. You got to lock yourself in a closet, sit down with your computer, make projections based on what's happened in the past, tied to a plan. I want to look like this in 12 months. So you do those projections, make sure they're tied to a plan, then you put it away, right? Once a month, you check and make sure your train's not running off the tracks. So you follow that plan-ish, right? So you make a plan tied to financial projections, but if some opportunity comes up, you're not tied to that irrevocably, but it at least gives you a starting point to make really good decisions throughout the year, so you at least get to where you plan to be, if not better. Big one. Do what you do best and hire to your weakness. I can't tell you how many times I have worked with small business owners who think that the best use of their time is to lock themselves in their bedroom for hours on end learning how to use QuickBooks. If you don't have a proclivity for accounting and love QuickBooks, stop the madness and hire somebody who is good at it and can do that for you so that you can get out and sell your product. Do what it is that you are really good at rather than beating your head against the wall, rolling up your sleeves, and getting it done, right? That's not smart. Hire to your weakness. From the first day you start your business, you should have a plan to get out of it. And I got to tell you that we're coming up on a really big moment in our country's time, period of time, where the boomers are going to be leaving the workforce, and they're going to be selling their small businesses. And you better, right now, have a plan for what that looks like. Please have a plan, because what you're doing is trying to build value in your company before you sell it. And if you don't have a plan, it's not going to work. Last, I can't tell you how many small business owners we've worked with who hate their jobs. If you hate your job, you are going to be bad at it. Stop. Making $4 an hour and hating your life is not a recipe for success. So, as long as you love what you do, chase it forever. But please, you're not forced to run a small business. The last thing I'll say is that we are really fortunate in Montana. We are seeing some amazing opportunities crop up in parts of this state, some tied to things like the Bakken, others tied to things like Montana State University and University of Montana having this pipeline of potential companies come out. We are at a really exciting time in Montana in general. The eyes are on the future. And I saw a slide somewhere here earlier about collaboration. I can't overemphasize that. If we have U of M and MSU working together collaboratively, we'll get way more done. If we put those two universities, jammed them together, I'm not saying we're going to do that, you have a powerhouse of research going on in this state. That's amazing stuff. So collaborating with one another to get to the end of to get to the finish line is a big thing that we see needs to happen more. So, thank you very much.
Dave, stay up. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed your silver bullets. Let's go over those together quickly. Should we do them in reverse or forward? All right, let's go in reverse. All right, love what you do. Okay? Have an exit plan. Hire to your weakness. Do what you do best. Plan from your projections. Use mentors, external opinions, board of directors. Grab and go. Work harder, smarter, and closer. All right. Thank you so much, Dave. Really appreciate it. Let's see. I know we have one more speaker here. Patience, Michael. All right, Dr. Michael Braun. You're starting to see a pattern here. Michael, thank you. Michael is an associate professor of the University of Montana School of Business. Michael received his BA in Asian Studies from Cornell University, an MA with a Hearst Fellowship in Publishing and Media from New York University, and an MBA from the University of Southern California's Marshall School of Business, and a PhD in Management from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. Prior to academia, he was a director with a Los Angeles-based boutique merchant bank, Stevens & Partners, where he initiated, raised capital for, and managed leveraged buyout strategies and transactions for private equity firms, as well as acquisitions and divestitures for private and publicly traded firms, among them family-owned enterprises. His early career was spent in business development and publishing, direct marketing, and e-commerce in Los Angeles, New York, and Europe. No, we're not through yet. Michael's academic, no, we'll let it go there. Family. Mr. Dr. Michael Braun.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure for me to be here today. What a great turnout. It's always tough being the last person to talk. The food fatigue has moved in, and people are kind of spacing out. So I thought I would sing my presentation, if that's okay. Anyway, no. I'm going to talk about family businesses here today. But before I start that, we've heard a lot of statistics right now about small businesses, their importance, their ubiquity. In essence, that small businesses are big business, right? So we looked at some of the labor statistics that 30 million small businesses are across the country, and obviously we have 92% right here in Montana. They employ over half the workforce and create 65% of the new jobs. What I want to do is peel back one more layer of that onion and talk about family businesses. Let me see a show of hands. Who is involved in a family business here? Come on. Okay, so that's probably about 40%. I see, for instance, the Muralts, and I see Windermere over here, and Pink Grizzly and all that. Okay. If you go around the globe, folks, about 80 to 90% of all businesses are actually family-owned businesses. And by family, we can stretch that not just to say, father, son, mother, daughter, but it's also couples, it's also cousin consortiums. So they are all over the world. We're talking from the smallest mom and pops to some of the biggest companies out there, the biggest and the most prominent. So for instance, Lego, the toy maker, family business. Swatch, Tootsie Roll. The biggest company in the world, Walmart, is a family business. Little quiz here. Between BMW, Ford, and Toyota, which one's a family business? All of them, that's right. And then we can add a couple more automotive manufacturers. We can add Fiat, we can add Peugeot, we can add even Chrysler now that it's part of Fiat. So you'll see that family businesses are ubiquitous at all sizes of organizational forms. Now they do present certain challenges, but they also provide specific opportunities, and I want to just go through those really quickly and then try to contextualize them and loop back to some of the stuff that was discussed before me. But on the challenges side, as as many of you know who are in family businesses, there are unique challenges. Probably the biggest one is always the succession. Who's going to take over the reins of the business? And when you know it, it's about a 30% success rate, transitioning a business from one generation to the next. That means by the third generation, only 10% of family businesses actually make it to the third generation. To the fourth generation, it's about 3%. So that's a pretty steep hill to climb. The other thing is, and this is to latch on to Dave's comment before, every 60 seconds there's a baby boomer getting ready to retire, turning 65. And there's nobody out there, when you're talking about 80 to 90% of these businesses being family owned, there's nobody there to really take over. So that's going to really impact not just the nationwide economy, but also our regional economy right here. Another challenge concerns talent management. How do you balance aristocracy, right, blood relations, with meritocracy? So how can family businesses try to attract the right kind of talent, outside talent, while also trying to keep in the business staffed with their own family members? So there's always going to be tensions. There's a lot of conflict management that has to happen, not just among family members, but also between non-family managers and family managers. So that's another challenge right there. And then lastly is, how do you balance the needs of the family with those of non-family stakeholders? Stakeholders being not just employees, but we're also talking about suppliers, customers, so on and so forth. So for instance, you got to think, I mean, a family business will make investments, obviously, to ensure the long-term health of the company for the family's sake, but some of those investments need to be put towards the company for the sake of others as well. So there's always a balance between short-term investments and that long-term outlook for the health of the family going forward. And then lastly is that family firms tend to be more risk-averse. Just when we're doing a broad brush across organizational forms. And that's because they usually tend to also be in lower growth, lower innovation industries, when we're talking about retailing, for instance, when we're talking about apparel, when we're talking about newspapers. Newspapers is pretty risky these days, but you know, that's where they've been traditionally. So there's always an issue of how you get family businesses to reinvest, to grow, to innovate. And there are some tensions there as well. But there are also some wonderful distinguishing traits about family businesses. First one is that they do have a long-term outlook in terms of their management, which means that they don't really focus on just the short-term performance. We see what happens with publicly traded firms that have to hit the numbers on a quarterly basis. That volatility is just crazy, right? On average, actually, even in publicly traded firms, and about a third of the S&P 500 are actually family-owned firms, but those outperform non-publicly traded or non-family publicly traded firms by about 2 to 3%. So, hey, it's a great portfolio. I'm going to put my money into family firms over the long run, 2 to 3% points above the non-family ones. That's great. But it really is the tale of the tortoise versus the hare, where, you know, in the long run, the family businesses end up winning. Also, this long-term management that you find in family businesses tends to be much more thoughtful and involved. And the investments tend to be more broad, so not just in terms of growing the firm, but also ensuring the health and wealth of the employees in general, because employees are often seen as extended family members. There was a great quote by Bill Ford. He's the chairman of Ford Motor Company and obviously one of the descendants. But in 2008, at the height of the financial crisis, when Chrysler and GM were taking money out of the government, getting a handout, Ford actually said, "We don't need this." And he said, "The family has been through every cycle imaginable, including being weeks away from shutting down after World War II. This is much more than a financial investment. It's an emotional investment. If this was just about a financial investment, we would have been out years ago." So even Ford, just because they are a family firm, because they have this long-term outlook, making sure that future generations are going to be involved, not just the Ford family, but also its employees, they just manage much more successfully. And lastly, family businesses tend to be much more community-oriented, taking into consideration a broader stakeholder base. So A lot of it has to do because their reputation is inextricably tied to the community. So when your reputation and the name on the company, when they're tied together, you tend to be much more cautious about the way that you're going to behave out there. Let me bring it down to an operational level. And I want to contextualize it in terms of also recessionary environments. I mean, here we are, we're kind of bouncing around along the bottom. We're looking at nationwide growth rates of GDP of about 2%, 2.5%, I think. So there's still ways to go a little bit. I'm always surprised. I mean, as somebody who worked in industry and worked through recessions and saw their impact on small businesses, I worked in a very small business, I'm always surprised by how little there is in terms of managerial advice for how to manage over the course of recession. Do you know that recessions happen on average every 5 to 7 years? If you're going to have a 35-year career, you're going to go through a bunch of recessions. They are, in fact, one of the most creative forces out there. The demand shocks just decimate small and medium-sized businesses, and obviously we've also seen big businesses disappear out there. But it's also this creative destruction that a lot of times weeds out some of the lesser able companies out there, the broken business models, and then gives rise to new ones. And as Barb was saying, you actually get a lot of entrepreneurship happening out there when recessions happen, because customer preferences change. All of a sudden there's an opportunity for somebody to come in and try to fill a new gap out there. With family businesses, what's interesting though is because of their risk profile, they tend to do much better during the recession. At the onset of it, because they've been managing their investments with more caution, they tend to have a bigger buffer built in. So all of a sudden when that recession happens, they have that rainy day fund and they can make sure that at the onset of the recession, they're not going to hit the wall as much. But it's really as they're coming out that the growth rates are a lot more subdued for family businesses. They have a harder time pulling the trigger and getting that engine restarted. And they tend to lag other forms, other organizational forms, when it comes to that recovery period. So a couple of things to keep in mind for family businesses. First of all, I think at the national, at the regional, at the municipal level, we have to acknowledge their presence. We have to also think about legislative incentives. We've got to think about programs. We've got to think about guidance, all sorts of programs that can really help family businesses restart the economy and get their investments going for future growth. Another thing is, I do think that there are for-profit service providers, even in this room, that can proactively target family businesses for the good of their business and also for the family businesses. We're talking about hard skills out there. We're talking about lawyers. We're talking about investment professionals that can say, you know what, I'm going to try to understand what it means to be a family business. They have a unique challenge. They have a unique profile. I'm going to try to gear my services toward that particular type of customer base. And as we know, here in Montana, we're going to have probably 80–90% of those being family businesses indeed. It's also the softer skills out there. So we're talking about counselors, educators, sometimes even psychologists out there who can say, oh, you know what, there's a lot of conflict management that has to happen in family businesses on a day-to-day basis, and especially when you also have successions out there. I'm going to try to get inside that little black box of family businesses, try to understand it, and then make sure that I can provide better services to all the family businesses around me. So I think that's an opportunity. Lastly, as educators, and I am here as an educator, I think we have to do a better job of teaching our students, both at the undergrad and MBA level, about the family businesses out there. That when we're teaching out of textbooks and talking about Apple and IBM and Google and so on and so forth, it's going to be a very small percentage of students who are going to work for those companies. Most of them are actually going to work for small businesses, and the majority of those will be family-owned businesses as well. So as an outsider coming in, for instance, how do you manage that if you're going to hit up against the ceiling where the family owns, you know, the upper echelons of the business? Or even if you are a family business owner, how do you come in and make sure that you know how to manage all the diverse interests of family and non-family members? Let me wrap this up. If indeed the backbone of the U.S. and the global economy is small businesses, then it is priority number one that we provide the support, the direction, the leadership to the families who represent those small businesses the world around, and hopefully at the community level, that's something that we can do. I will leave you with two things, two calls for action. The first one is if you are a family business and would like access to some of the resources out there, including some of the family business centers and so on and so forth, I'll leave my business cards on the table of the World Trade Center over there in the corner, just because I work with those guys. Feel free to pick one up, call me, email me. I'll be happy to guide you, sit down with you, and let you know where you can find some assistance for that. The other thing is, I'm actually, this is a little personal pitch here, but I'm teaching an MBA class starting in April, and these are seasoned students who have as a task for the month of April to write a plan. This can be a marketing plan, a business plan, a startup plan, an operations plan, whatever it is. If you have a business, if you're a small business owner here, and most of you are, let me know, and I can throw one of my teams at it like a wolf pack, and it doesn't cost you anything. All righty? Thank you very much.
All right, it's your turn. Let's take about 5 minutes each table, come up with a couple of questions, come up with a spokesperson to ask the question, come up with topics that you'd like to see the chamber address over the next year, and then we'll go into a question period with our speakers, and thank you very much. Which table would like to go first? All right, right here. Pat, got a question for us?
Nick. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, this question is for Michael. My name is Pat Korek. I'm with the Farron Group. We're the estate development firm here in Missoula. And it's been a very interesting, 5 or 7 years for us watching the university grow kind of year in and year out. And counting on that growth, seeing what's happened this past fall with the reduction in enrollment. And so as Missoula as a city looks at kind of our key job drivers, the university certainly ties into that very directly. And so I'm wondering, we discussed it at the table, and the College of Technology was brought up is increasing enrollment. But what, if anything, is a university strategy for maintaining or growing enrollment going forward? I've heard that there's maybe a push to increase the academic standards at the university, which in turn might lower enrollment, just the ability for specifically Montana kids to get in without higher SAT or ACT scores. So if you'd address that, Michael, I'd appreciate it.
Two things. First of all, the last year has obviously been a very difficult one for the university, and these shocks, when they happen, they tend to, I think across the board, they tend to have a bigger drop and then level out after a while. So you have these swings of the pendulum. That's number one. Number two, I actually sat the whole thing down. I was on faculty exchange in Italy, so I watched from afar. Having come back, obviously, it took me a while to kind of get back up to speed, and talking to various members at the university, just trying to get a feel for, what we're, like you said, what we are going to do. I think some of it comes down to, just the basics. Again, let's make sure that we can try to offer a great education. We are the largest university here in the state of Montana, and we do have, obviously, some world caliber talent across the board, whether it is administrators, staff, and obviously faculty as well. So we're going to try to push on that. And some of the programs that we have on campus, they are world renowned. You think about forestry, you think about pharmacy. I mean, they are the leading ones, so obviously they need to be nurtured. And then we have other ones that, they need to continue to get visibility, at least in the Northwest, if not nationwide, to make sure that we can offer something that, is high quality at a oftentimes at a very good value. As for specifics, I really don't know. I think some of this will have to blow over a little bit. There are marketing campaigns both at main hall as well as specific schools. So we have hired some marketing and promotional and communications professors, and hopefully what they're going to do is they're going to come up with certain strategies that really address this. So I think that's something that will be unfolding here over the next 6 to 12 months.
Thank you, Michael. Next question. All right.
Hi. I don't know. I think the SBA is probably the place to ask this. We work for the Holiday Inn Hotel, and one of the challenges we find in our organization, we have about 125 associates that work with us, and we have multi-tier associates. We have executive level, we have the mid manager level, we have the line level workers that we work with, and so one of the things that we've been reading through reviews of other hotels is recruiting those different tiers. And I think finding a place to recruit from, or the question is, what resources do we have to find the appropriate workforce mix to sustain small business?
I mean, from a federal point of view, I don't know. I can't answer that. I would hypothesize it's more on a state. Are you talking like? I would hypothesize it's something more on a state level, the state labor offices, or I don't know how. It's something I can answer from an SBA point of view. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So as the state labor economists, we produce employment projections. I even have this little flyer. They're available on our website. What they're designed to do is kind of give people an idea of what jobs are expected to be in demand, where are you going to have a hard time finding workers, in what occupations. It's great. We get a lot of attention from HR professionals for those projections, also from education agencies so that they can properly train workers in each field so that we have enough workers to fill those expected jobs in the future. Those are things that we can do. In terms of recruiting, like we basically produce numbers and projections for that. I am not an HR person, so I can't give you some tips on recruiting good workers, really. Other than, I think that as a younger worker, there is a lot that new generations are looking for in the workplace, including things like more flexible work schedules. And I encourage all businesses to think about what's going to happen as their aging workforce retires and how they're going to bring up the younger generation and transfer the knowledge that their older workers have to the younger generation. I think it's really key to try to help your younger workers gain experience from those that are retiring. So that's all of my thoughts.
So Michael and Dave both hit on this. And remember they taught you about as soon as you start a business, plan your exit. Right? Plan your exit. So you can leave all the value of your company on the table and move on. Or you can preserve the value in your company, right? But part of that value is, as Barbara just talked about, is intellectual value. And how you transfer that experience, right, and the intellectual capital back to your people, and the job satisfaction that comes from that learning experience is of extreme value to the next generations that are our workforce. Next question. Rob.
I'm Rob Gabriel with the Missoula Building Industry Association. We are a nonprofit, membership-driven trade association. And our question for all of you is we're curious, how does a nonprofit organization navigate out of the recession now? Like where to invest our time, our energy, and our money and that sort of thing in moving forward? Sort of a broad-ranging question there, but anything?
That I am uniquely qualified to answer.
Excellent.
Because I run a nonprofit company. And I think one of the misnomers is that a nonprofit company doesn't just work just like a for-profit company, save tax time, right? That's the difference, and nonprofits are solving for a double bottom line in their mission. But it doesn't mean you don't sit down and understand what the value proposition is for the company and that it aligns with what your customers are seeking. And then you monetize, if you can, either through direct services or grant sources, a path forward. This is something that I feel very strongly about when it comes to nonprofits being smarter, because there is an extra onus for those nonprofits to be able to provide those services to the clients that they serve in a deeper way. So acting more like a business in understanding what it is your customers are seeking and providing it for them, which can take some hard questions and soul searching.
Not knowing the specifics here, but we keep hearing about this term new normal. I want to ask something of the people here in this room. Who has a different customer base today than they had 6 years ago? Okay. So this often happens in recessions. It's not that your customers went away and then all of a sudden they come back to you. A lot of times they're gone forever. And then it's up to you to seek out other constituents, customers, whatever it is, based on what that new normal is. Because all of a sudden you have a very different mindset. People value things differently. They make their purchasing decisions very differently. They have a different framing. So, I think the wrong thing here would be to say, oh, okay, just increase your marketing and sales and promotional budget. No. You got to think about who is that new customer, or how has that preference changed over the last 6 years since we went out.
All right, thank you. So, Rob, don't forget the Missoula Building Industry Association and Remodelers Council, right? So what's going on? What am I doing? I'm not building that new home, right? What are we doing remodeling? What's our company doing, right? We're not building a new building, we're remodeling. And so wherever that new normal is, right, it may be in building new homes, but it may be in building something else entirely. So good luck in your search, and thank you for the honest answers. Next question. Oh, he's got his own mic. Pretty nice, yeah.
I'll talk loud. I think you made a comment, Barbara, that you expect to see job growth again in the wood products industry. And me and my partner here are a couple of the 8,000 that lost our jobs in the wood product industry. So we're interested as to what you see that you would comment that you see growth coming in the wood products industry. And the second part of that is your birth rate chart showed manufacturing at the very bottom. What do you think needs to be done or can be done at this local level versus the state level, national level, for us to grow manufacturing back in the Missoula area?
Okay, so first off, the wood product manufacturing question. And actually, if you want more details, I actually do talk about it a lot in our publication of the employment projections. But the short answer is that the wood products industry in terms of employment has been moving downward over a very long period of time. There was a shock with the recession that really got a lot of job losses very quickly. We see that some of those jobs are coming back, but we still think that this long-term trend of declining employment in the industry is going to continue in the long term. So the shape of the wood employment in the wood products manufacturing is a few jobs coming back now and then starting to decline again in the long term. Now, that being said, the amount of dollars and GDP produced and personal income produced by the wood products industry has not been declining. The industry is becoming more productive over the long term, which means that you need fewer employees, but you actually produce more money. Now, I have heard and I'm not an expert in wood products, but I know that you do have some timber industry experts at BBER here in Missoula. And I have heard that a lot of smaller firms are being more successful in the timber industry and more able to adapt than the larger firms were. And I am not exactly sure how that will end up happening, but I think that they're able to customize their products a little bit easier. And so you're looking at a lot of more customization of the wood products rather than producing a ton of the same thing. That's my understanding of it. Again, I'd send you somewhere else to get a better understanding of the wood products industry. The second question you said about manufacturing. Manufacturing has a small startup rate, largely because it's very costly to start a manufacturing firm. You need a big building, you need lots of floor space, you need lots of machines, and we've seen a great amount of small manufacturers come up within the last couple years in the state of Montana. You know, in the Bozeman area, we're having biotech, and they're making new plastics, and we're also really have a lot of new manufacturing industries that are kind of coming off Montana's tourism and trade industry. Like, we're making little floaters that are biodegradable for fishing and things like that. These are all very small manufacturers. They could grow up into bigger manufacturers. And I think that it is kind of, you know, as Nick was mentioning, comparative advantage. People will buy things made in Montana that are related to the fishing industry because we have great fishing here, and so they just assume that we must also have really great fishing gear, right? And I'm sure we do. So there's kind of like finding this niche market in manufacturing, and I think that's where we're going to see a lot more of our manufacturing in the future.
Can I say something real quick? I've actually, to go on what Barbara said about manufacturing, I've run across some interesting examples where she's exactly right. The cost of entry is so high. But what companies are seeing now, for example, I ran across a small business that started up in Colorado that's been very successful in producing dog treats. But they don't go in, I didn't even know this, I'd never heard it before, but they're what they call contract kitchens, where instead of, like, you know, they were going, oh, we have to invest, you know, a couple $100,000 in ovens and all this. There was a place where you could go and rent or lease out a kitchen for, I can't remember what she said, it was 24 hours a week or something like that. Now, the interesting thing is, I'm a big beer fan, so I hope I'm not alone in this room, but the microbrewers industry is huge. I think Nick and I were talking about earlier. It's actually the Microbrewers Association is in Boulder, Colorado, and they said there's over 2,000 microbrewers, and that's growing by like 50 a month or something. It's crazy. And here, I've actually had a few last night. But the interesting thing is there's a company, I met in the cost of entry of, well, I want to brew my beer. It's one thing to do it at home, but when you want to step up your scale, you know, you have to invest in all the boilers and all the product. They have contract brewers. And I had just found this out because a lot of the explosive growth in microbrewers, there's not this incredible amount of upfront money you have to put in when you actually have there's a brewer, it's actually right outside of downtown Denver, that they actually rent or lease out their brewery, their space and equipment and everything else. So it's really fascinating. It goes, I think, along what we've talked about here is changing, you know, the idea and paradigm of how you approach business models. And my point that I was talking to several, an interview I gave earlier, was that, you know, our entrepreneurs here in this country are amazingly creative. And the idea is we need to continue to release that creative energy and approach, not just to products, but to process as well. So when it comes to the idea of taking something that you traditionally think, well, you're brewing beer, where you go, oh, I got to, you know, invest a couple $100,000 and get warehouse space and do this. And you now, you know, there are people, figuring out ways, same thing with cooking products or anything like that, ways that you can lease a kitchen or lease a brewery. It's just amazing when I didn't even realize, I thought I was a smart guy, and, you know, I'm missing it. And that's what, is their approach to, you know, wood products or others? I don't know. But I think what I wanted to do was highlight what Barbara said is there are other ways that industries are figuring it out. And there are other ways that industries are capitalizing on that. Granted, there's someone on the other side who said, well, I've got the money. I will go invest $500,000 in this, you know, a brewery facility and then lease it out. You know, when contract brewers come up to me, they bring their product in. I lease it out to them for whatever, 2 weeks or a week, a month, or however long they need it. They can brew their beer, we clean it out, and get the next guy to come in. So it's amazing to hear these stories, that the creativity and the innovation that way. Sorry.
Thank you very much. And that will bring us to a bit of a close. Thank you very much, John. Thank you for the question. It's amazing if you've been out to Bonner Mill and actually see the log yard up and running again. So something's happening in terms of manufacturing out there. For all of you, in terms of the questions you had in terms of workforce and in terms of the needs and desires of hiring appropriate workforce, don't forget that our friends over at Missoula Economic Partnership, Brigida and James Grunke right over there, are doing workshops constantly with local talent and outside talent. The Missoula Chamber of Commerce and our management workshops is doing the exact same thing. The success of small business is what we're about. It's the service we provide, and we provide it together. And I would like to have everyone give a warm round of applause to our panelists today. I'd invite the media up to have Adam, so don't leave, you folks. And then you'll have a chance right after the media. The Small Business Fair is still open over there with other resources. And thank you so much for your time. I hope you learned. It was great to see each and every one of you today. God bless. Have a good afternoon.